coaches will talk about is that you have to be in double support in the front in order to increase the speed of the discus. And that doesn't seem to be the case. That you can actually increase the velocity of the discus in
take Stona and take Alekna. What's the biggest difference and the biggest similarities between the two, since you've seen both of them throw extremely far, one breaking the world record, one throwing 99% of his PR based off of the data?
So I guess the asterisk to this is I've not looked at Stona's data in as much detail as for Alekna's, because we wrote that 4-piece series. So we went in depth in pretty much every one of Alekna's throws out of the entire series. And then it was only really after the Olympics that I went back to look at Stona's data in more detail. What stood out to me on Stona's throw that was like 69.06. I think he just went just over 69 in Ramona. Is that his flight time was really, really small. Like it was barely in the air at all.
How would you define flight time?
So flight time, the time between left foot off the ground, out of the back, and right foot down in the middle. So flight phase, non-support phase, whatever you want to call it. I want to say it was on the order of like 50 milliseconds, which within video is like, depending on what frame rate you have, like you're barely able to see it. I actually remember this because my colleague asked me, was there a recording with me, who doesn't really, he's an athletic trainer and comes and helps out for the research that we do.
Yeah.
But he asked me, he's like, do people ever have both feet on the ground? And I was like, no. I was like, I think there's always a flight phase, but it's super small.
There was a Belarusian shot putter named Yuri Bilanov, and he spun sort of like, almost like Jacko Gill, where it's like really long on his left, and then his right was down right away, but like not the way Stona does it. Stona to me is more like Krauser.
Yeah, so super low, minimal flight phase, and then getting to double support really, really quick. Again, when we looked at Alekna's data, it seems like he catches the discus so deep, right? When he gets to double support, his separation angle between hip and shoulder disc is like 200, the disc is at like 285 or something. So at one point, I posted this on Twitter, and somebody made a point. It's like, there's no way that you can get more than 180 degrees of separation. It's like 90 degrees of separation between hips and shoulders. Sort of impossible, but the data actually sort of showed that it's probably the way that the model works. But again, his amount of separation, quite noticeable.
Yeah.
And Stona actually came really close. I thought it was only like Alekna catches it really deep, but Stona did a really good job of getting double support.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. So the flight, the decreased flight time out of the back, do you see an increase in acceleration of the center of mass across the circle, or do you see an increase in double support at the front relative to that, or is it sort of like those are just two characteristics that they both just get to double support very quickly, and they both, like, it's one doesn't beat the other?
I didn't quite get everything, like every part of that question.
Okay, so if you think about Stona's flight phase is 50 milliseconds or whatever. Let's say Alekna is 100. I don't know the exact data on it, but let's say Alekna is 100. Do you see Stona's shorter flight phase leads to enabling him to get to double support faster at the front, to then have a longer double support relative to Alekna, or is it they basically both have like a pretty similar double support relative to the rest of their movement? Like, I guess I'm trying to figure out. It's a two-part question, really. It would be like, what's the double support time relative to the rest of the throw or relative to the entire throw? And do you notice anything with like center of mass? Because I remember reading like the Alekna stuff, and it's like he moves his center of mass really quickly to the front, even though his double support might not, or his flight phase might not be as long, or is longer. Sorry.
Yeah, so I don't know if there's necessarily a correlation between duration of flight phase. It could be in the sense that I guess what you want to do is, or what we notice with Alekna, right? It still is a fairly low flight phase, certainly under 100 milliseconds. But his center of mass is basically like middle of the circle when his right foot hits. And so it's something that Mo Satara said
Like
as well. That
here, staying on is the middle.
yeah, so you sort of stay back, and it leaves him a lot of room to work within the front. And so having more room, I think, allows him not to slow down as much. Where some throwers, if you get too far towards the
left,
front,
shift forward.
yeah, so that's another thing, right? Shifting left and right. But if you don't have a lot of room in the front to work with, you definitely have to slow down, or you have to like brake harder or produce more force trying to decelerate. And depending on, I guess, how you're throwing or how you're blocking, et cetera, that might create other issues or lead to other things. And so I don't know if a shorter flight phase is necessarily associated with where you end up in the front, because I think it also depends on where your center of mass is at coming out of the back, right? How much you sit into the throw on your left leg, how much you shift over onto the left.
Out of the back.
Yeah.
What do you think with like do you think Alekna's high point with his right hand, when his right leg, when he hits that grounding position in the middle, do you think that has any play on helping him stay over his right in the middle?
I've thought about this too, in the sense of that his high point isn't in the center of the sector, right? It's
like
very
right.
noticeable, like almost down the right sector line.
Yeah.
And the orbit is slightly different, and I think this also then plays into like what the system axis is doing, like how the axis around which you're rotating, and how that is tilted.
So maybe it helps.
So
Okay, overrated, underrated. Alekna's high point. Well, I guess what I would ask is like, okay, so you coach some high school kids, because I think the biggest thing is like, with lifting and with throwing, the sole purpose of all of this research is like, I mean, maybe not the sole purpose, but like a large majority of it for me personally is like, how can I consume this and then apply it to a kid who's in 7th to 9th grade and take like, I term it like the normal person player. Like you're looking at the normal kid. How can we decrease their flight time? How can we improve, like, basically, I think by doing that, you improve their sweep. So you decrease their flight time, but then how do you get them to stay over that right longer? And it's like, if I'm looking at this data, how do I transmit this to a kid in middle school or high school, learning from the best? I guess, how do you do that?
That was a big struggle to tell you. But it was a good experience. It has been a good experience, I think, because it's one thing trying to make the information more digestible and talk to like more accomplished coaches like you, and then also talking to high school kids. Yeah. And trying to get them to actually do the thing you tell them to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say with the shorter flight time, I mean, I have kids that they exhibit this where their right foot comes down like really quick, but then their left leg, they're basically still pushing out. They're still hangs, and I think that's like they have to get off the left leg as well. And so again, the Alekna and Stona, even like for all these throws, if you have a short flight time, their left leg is already moving past whatever outside, like your 90 or 180 axis, right?
Do you see with that question actually then, okay, so like the left side opening, do you see that playing a role in how fast the left gets to the front?
I don't think we've looked at this specifically. So what do you
Like when
what,
the left opens here,
Yep.
if I'm grounded in double support longer out of the back, if I pick up and my left foot is less open versus if I pick up and my left foot is more open, do you think one of those could lead to a faster or a sooner double support?
in the front?
Yeah, and the only reason I'm asking this is because Alekna doesn't really, I mean, he opens to like 180 and then goes.
And then
Stone is a little more, you know, like Robert Harding, if you watch like, or Alex will go like well past that. And I don't know if you've noticed anything or not.
So we've tried to look at some correlations between these phase durations, sort of like you're describing, the correlation between double support in the back, double support in the front, single support, or like entry time once the right foot picks up in the back, right? And then how long the sweep takes, essentially. One of the, I mean, this is like the scientific problem or research problem is that defining double support gets a little tricky based on, is it like maximum backswing is typically where we think of that starting, but for some guys
Here, like a wind go.
Yeah, like beginning of the, or end of the wind.
Yeah.
But end of the wind is sort of tricky to define, right? Some guys will have a little bit extra motion.
Yeah.
Some guys like deliberately try to prolong it. And then that creates these outliers, like statistical outliers, when like they go move super slow and then they speed up.
Yeah.
So that phase duration is super variable. The other is with double support in the front, like the release phase, or delivery phase, double support. Gets a little tricky to define as well, because based on like which leg comes out first, right? If you reverse.
Yeah, right leg or left leg.
Yeah. And so, I mean, an interesting thing that we've actually seen that I know some coaches will talk about is that you have to be in double support in the front in order to increase the speed of the discus. And that doesn't seem to be the case. That you can actually increase the velocity of the discus. And so if we're talking about the delivery phase, in the double support delivery phase, in single support, and we actually see some increase in.
Would that be if the left leg's up, if you're a right-handed thrower, or if the right leg's up that you've seen that?
I think both.
Really?
And
because I would believe in the right side picking up, because I know like Val does that.
But here's the thing though: is that are we talking about horizontal or vertical velocity?
Okay.
Because I think horizontal velocity, I think that's more of what we typically think about.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what
yeah.
we see, right? In order to increase rotational, it's that angular momentum we're creating around the vertical axis. Being in double support definitely helps, but single support, you can actually increase vertical velocity still to some extent.
Okay.
And I think it's about.
So it's sort of like, it's not as cut and dry as like if you're in single support or you're jumping, you're done. It's more like it's advantageous to stay in double support, but an early pickup isn't going to necessarily be the absolute worst thing for your throw.
It may not be the end of
Yeah, of your result.
the result,
Yeah.
right?